Peninsula Candidates Forum, hosted by the Key Peninsula Civic Center, the Community Council, the Key Peninsula Business Association, the KP News, and the Mustard Seed Project. So this is being recorded and will be online later off the Mustard Seed YouTube channel. So this will be posted later on as she gets it together there. So I want to start out just by doing some quick rules here. We have a timekeeper up front here, Kathleen and Kathy, both community council. Kathleen is our volunteers. Kathy is our president. And so they're going to be the timekeepers. We're going to be limiting the responses to 1 minute. So just ask you to be brief and correct. There will be time at the end of the time for you to make additional comments. So if you don't feel like you can get everything out in 1 minute, you might make some notes to yourself and you can follow up at the end when we give you time to follow up. The Key Peninsula Candidates Forum is a nonpartisan, unbiased format established by the Key Peninsula Community Council. I'm your moderator, by the way. I'm Chuck West. I'm also an elected official in the school board, so I'm not running for election. That's why I'm up here today. I'm also retired from my local fire department, so many of you know me in that role. I'm going to get right into it by introducing our candidates. So we have candidates, and it's not in the order that I have here, but I'm going to go right down the order I have here. So for the sheriff, Pierce County Sheriff, we have Patty Jackson. You want to just give a wave? Okay. And Keith Schmeck. For the 6th Congressional District, we have Emily Randall and Drew McEwen. Did I pronounce that right? Is it McEwen?
McEwen.
McEwen, okay. 26th District Legislative Position 1 is Addison Richards.
Oh, it's typed.
And Jesse Young will be coming in another event. For 26th District Position 2, we have Michelle
I took a
Faulkner
20-minute power nap on my couch in my
and
office.
Tiffany Mitchell.
Yeah.
So those are our candidates tonight. We have some questions that have been sent in to us online. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask, we ask that you write them down and forward them to the front table up there. There is some paper where you can fill out and write your questions down. And then they will get those up to me, and we'll, if time allowing, we'll add some more questions. So these are the questions that have come in via email, and I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Okay. So I'm going to start with the very top here, and so it's going to be for our legislative positions. I would like to ask what candidate, and I'm reading this directly, what candidates will do to help the 1 in 5 families in the country who are the working poor, those who have jobs but not make enough to afford food, housing for their families each month. What are your plans for legislation such as Medicare, staff, or child tax credit? And I'm going to start out with just going down my list, and I'll start with Emily.
Okay.
And you might check your mics, they've told them been turned off.
Let's see. I think I just turned it on.
Yep.
There we go. Is this a distance where you can hear me? Yeah, okay. Oh, closer? Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Chuck, for the question. My policy work in the legislature has really been focused on making sure that families in Washington of all income levels have access to essentials like healthcare, education, childcare. And I think we could really build on some of the work that we've done in Washington State at the federal level. In Washington, we passed the capital gains tax and the working families tax credit, which is a state version of the child tax credit. I'd love to see us expand and strengthen that at the federal level. It's made an impact on so many families locally, and it certainly made an impact on my family when my mom was struggling to get back into the workforce. We also need to lower healthcare costs, make college and trade education more accessible, and invest in childcare programs and housing affordability so that families can survive.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Drew McEwen. Thanks for having. Thank you for having us here tonight. It's a pleasure. The economy is not working for a large number of working families in the 6th congressional district. We've got family savings that have been wiped out through massive inflation over the last few years, and subsequently we've seen credit card debt now spiking, and interest rates are at decade highs. That's not sustainable, and that has had a negative impact on the families in this district. Part of that at the federal level is getting back to having a budget. The continuous resolutions that we've operated under are part of the problem, because you never address the real problems there. You're always putting a Band-Aid on it. We need to get back to a structural form so we can reduce the debt, drive down interest rates, and make living more affordable for families. And a lot of that is healthcare, it's education, it's having infrastructure for a strong economy in rural areas. And those are all key components that I look forward to advocating for. Thank you.
Michelle?
Okay. Hello. Oh, no, that's not on.
Yep, I think you had it.
Oh, was it on?
Yep.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay. So one of the things that I've noticed over the last 10 years since I've been serving you in Olympia is that the number of regressive taxes that have come through. One of those is the Climate Commitment Act. And a lot of people say, oh, well, I want to help the environment. And what does that mean? What that meant to working families was an additional around 50-cent gas tax and a 20% rise in your energy costs. And then we just saw that there was the natural gas ban bill that essentially overnight for PSE customers, it increased energy costs another 20%. We need to stop a lot of these regressive taxes and making sure that people are able to afford to be able to get to work and afford to be able to live, and keeping property taxes down, as well as making sure that there's enough housing for all of us to reduce that cost. Thank you.
Okay, so as someone who has served in a legislative position before I moved to the state of Washington, I actually was a state representative in the state of Oregon in 2019. My entire career was really based on trying to help others and to try to lower costs for working people within that state. And that is something that is incredibly important to me, even up here in the state of Washington. And it's what I've built my entire campaign around. Trying to make sure that we, for example, are focusing in on the things that we can impact. For example, trying to work with developers to figure out how do we create more housing that is affordable for all income levels here in the state of Washington, which is a huge deal for so many people who deal with huge rent increases and potentially wanting to get into the real estate market themselves. High healthcare costs and high prescription drugs, figuring out how do we exert pressure as a state to bring that down, and that's about it.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. Thank you, Civic Center, for hosting us. Thank you to the Scouts for everything that you're doing to help serve us tonight. And I'm just really excited and fired up to be here with you all tonight. I'm Addison Richards, running for state representative, position 1. And I care a lot about this issue. I've spent my legal career working for people struggling to make ends meet. I'm currently working with people in housing crises. I've fought for survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, trying to obtain things like protection orders, and working through complex divorces. And so I have a short-term and a long-term solution here. There's a lot in the short term that our state government should be doing to help alleviate the cost of health care, child care, housing, long-term care. There's so much that we can do to help change policy, regulation, and that's my first approach. Rather than just throwing money at a problem, let's look at why we don't have enough providers, we don't have enough housing. It's a supply-demand issue that I see first and foremost. in the short term. And in the long term, it's investing in our kids and in things like career tech education and making sure that people have a pathway towards the careers that are going to benefit them for the rest of their lives. Thank you.
Let's let our sheriffs in on this a little bit, and I've got a question for you guys. So the Key Peninsula is a unique community. How do you see your role as sheriff benefiting the Key Peninsula in the reduction of crime? And we'll start with you, Pat.
Is this on?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Patty Jackson, and I am pleased to be here. Thank you so much for spending, again, another night with me for some of that we saw last night. I am already the Chief of Patrol with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, and we do serve the Key Peninsula area. And I'm here to tell you that I understand that we don't have enough deputies to cover the square footage that we have out, the square mileage, that we have out here. And we are working to try and not only increase our department as a whole, but to make sure that we are putting the deputies in the places where we're needing the calls for service and being able to respond to the type of policing that you are requiring and that you deserve as Key Peninsula community members. I will tell you right now that we are working hard and getting more and more deputies coming to the Pierce County Sheriff's Department because this is the department that they wish to work for. And I am honored to serve in the capacity that I'm serving at.
As your sheriff, I'm going to look at the staffing that we have here in the Key Peninsula. It's my understanding that we are understaffed here, and at sometimes there's only 2 deputies working in this whole area, which is 720 square miles. That's unacceptable staffing levels. Even if we add a 3rd deputy there, we'll be increasing our staffing by 50%, and we'll have the ability to be able to respond to calls. Right now, a deputy might have to run code for 45 minutes from one end of the peninsula to the other end of the peninsula to get to a call. That's unacceptable, especially when there's crimes of violence going on, and the residents are dependent upon us coming there to help make the area safe. Also, we need to continue with recruiting. The recruiting is down with the agency. It's difficult because the deputies in the corrections and on the road deputies, they have no confidence in their leadership. So with me as the sheriff, an outside person looking in on it, we'll change the leadership around and we will have the right leaders in place. Thank you.
Something near and dear to the hearts of people here on the Key Peninsula is Highway 302 and the Pretty Bridge. It's an aging infrastructure that has been studied many times over the last few decades for replacement. But we're being told again that it's just being put on the back burner. And so I'm going to ask our state reps, or candidates for the reps, what you would do to move forward improvements to Highway 302. And I'll start back to this end, we'll start with Addison and go back to
Great. So I grew up here, right? Went to Peninsula High School. I've driven over the Purdy Bridge more times than I can count. And look, right, we need a solution more than hoping that bridge is having a good day and that light turns green, right? We've needed that for a long, long time. And it was really unhelpful when in 2015 our representatives did not get a single project for our district in the transportation package that passed. It set us on the back burner for a lot of different projects. What we need to make sure we do is have a representative in Olympia, in the majority caucus, fighting for solutions for our district, fighting for projects like in Purdy or in Gorst, or throughout our community. There's so much work that we have to do. We've got to make sure that we've got to sit at the table and that we're fighting hard for solutions to that. And look, I'm open to whatever is going to work best for this community, help maintain its rural character and rural nature, while also providing the traffic relief and flow that we all need here. Thanks.
Absolutely, and let me just reiterate everything that Addison Richards just said so succinctly and so wonderfully. All of that, because I do know that that is a huge issue for folks in this area of the district. When I've talked to folks on their doors, that repeatedly comes up. Another thing that I have heard that comes up is, for example, Key Center, and some of the infrastructure issues that they have there with some failing septic systems. I think it just highlights overall how much the Key Peninsula has been ignored in so many ways at the state level, and how important it is for myself and then Addison to be able to really fight for this particular part of the district to ensure that we have projects that actually will make this place better and serve the people here.
I do want to correct Addison that in 2015, there were projects for our district. I did not vote for the gas tax. That was a project that was put forward with the gas tax. Jan Angel, at last minute, because it was already going to pass out of the Senate, she decided to vote for it to get projects in for our district, and I worked with her because I said, there's no way I can vote for the gas tax. And she said, I will be willing to vote for it because, you know, that was her last term as well. And she wound up getting in some projects, but definitely not enough. I agree with that. In the meantime, I have fought over and over again, and we did get projects into the budget previously. Unfortunately, our current governor line item vetoed everything. He is focused more on putting all of our gas dollars into fixing the fish culverts, which should be coming out of our operating budget, and his whole agenda that he has done to increase the costs of ferries and everything else that we have been suffering. And I'm hoping with the new administration, whoever it is, that they will actually allow us to work and we will fix some of our agencies and fix the transportation budget, and it will come back to you. Thank you.
So this one's near and dear to my heart. Again, I'm going to focus on our state reps. School districts are supposed to be adequately funded through the state. They're not. We have to rely on local levies to fund school districts. What would you do to help out the school districts with funding? And let's start with Michelle.
So when I came in, I inherited the McCleary decision. I was one of the negotiators in the House to help make it so that we were adequately funding K through 12 education. Now, when it comes down to funding K through 12 education, there is something called basic education, and then there is additional services. Far longer of a conversation than 1 minute. However, there are certain parts of basic education that we have fully funded, and there are other parts that we have not, which is special education and transportation. I have continually fought for those. The other piece that happened was the negotiations that happened when the Senate had control. They made it so that there were caps on the levies, so that we were not having a McCleary number 2. Unfortunately, after Democrats gained majority in the Senate, they reneged on that whole negotiation and wound up increasing the levy rates, and we have had huge issues ever since. And also the lack of students that are in the classrooms.
All right, so in terms of what we can do to help, this is a situation and an issue that so many people, again, in this district have brought up to me as a problem for them. And as someone who lives in Port Orchard, which is in the South Kitsap School District, I feel like that is even more pronounced there when I talk to folks who frequently tell me that they are commuting their children, for example, from Port Orchard to Gig Harbor, if they lived there previously, kept them in that school district because they wanted to make sure that their kids got a better education than they felt they were getting in South Kitsap. And a large part of that, again, comes back to our levies and bonds. I personally want to prioritize going back and looking at how we're currently funding, finding more progressive revenue that will actually fund all of our school districts so that we're not asking our communities to come in from behind and try to fund that from behind. It's not fair to our communities, and it's certainly not fair to our kids.
Thank you. This is also near and dear to my heart. I'm a cross-country coach as a volunteer in the spare time that I do have. And again, grew up in the Peninsula School District. I have a lot of friends in the South Kitsap School District that can't pass a bond. We did just pass a bond and levy up at Bremerton. But look, we have to change the funding formula. The way that we're doing it is not working. We are punting too much of the funding responsibility down to local property owners. And I get, if you're a low-income senior and your income's not rising and your tax bill is, I get that. And we just had a court case out of Southwest Washington, the Supreme Court decided that capital budget funding was not part of a basic education. I can remember here at Peninsula, we had water coming through the ceiling in one of the portables, and our teachers literally catching it with a wastebasket. And it's just unacceptable, right? We know that Fishbowl had to move because the facility is not built to handle crowds. There's nothing like standing on the sideline at Roy Anderson Field on a Friday night, right? But we've got to change the entire funding formula so that places like Mercer Island and Bellevue are also contributing to the basic education for everybody else too.
So for our federal level here, partisanship has been getting worse and worse in Washington, D.C. What we see coming out is atrocious from both parties. What would you do to help unite people in this country, in Washington, D.C., and help to benefit us here in Cape?
I think among the many benefits of being a legislator from the 26th district is that I've represented a truly purple district, a district of equal number Republicans and Democrats over these last 6 years, and not just by necessity, but because it matters to me as someone who grew up here. I've had the chance to talk to and work alongside community members who are Republicans, Democrats, and independent, and to work alongside two colleagues in the legislature who are a different party than I am. But we come together to work on capital investments and work on projects that we can agree on, like funding for the Mustard Seed Project and ensuring that our communities are getting the investments that they deserve. I think relationships is how we combat that partisan extremism, relationships with our neighbors, relationships with colleagues across the aisle, and I'm committed to continuing that way.
So this is the third time Emily and I have done this in the last 36 hours, so I think we can probably just give each other's answers. I've served in the minority in the legislature for 12 years, and I've had to work across the aisle, and you have to develop those friendships, and you've got to work in both chambers if you're going to get anything done, and work with an administration you often don't agree with. And I'll take that same experience to Washington, D.C., but I'd also add, and I said this earlier today too, we got to stop vilifying each other. It's completely acceptable to disagree, and we can be agreeable when we do that, right? Emily's my opponent, not my enemy. The enemy is the guy that invaded Ukraine. It's the Iranian-funded terrorist group in the Middle East. It's the Chinese Communist Party that's looking to take over Taiwan. Those are the threats to America, not each other. And we've got to take the temperature down in this country, take the tone down, and the more pragmatic leadership we have in Washington, D.C. will drown out the fringe voices on both sides of the aisle and restore some dignity into this system. Thank you.
Back to our sheriff candidates. So I'm a retired battalion chief here, so I've worked with the deputies quite a bit. How will you garner support and bring together the deputies that are working the streets? The morale is pretty low because the limitations have been pushed on them by the states. And so what can you do to support them at your level? So I'll start with Patty.
Thank you very much. I am here to tell you that serving for the Pierce County Sheriff's Department for the past 35 years, there has not been one time in our career where we've heard everybody say the morale's never been better. But I will tell you that we are seeing an upswing in actually everybody that is still selflessly dedicated to serving the communities because they are feeling supported. Most importantly, they're feeling supported by the communities, and that is making a big change. We are recognizing men and women for the great job that they're doing. That's making a change. And we are making certain that they are heard, they are seen, they are valued, and that they also are looking to make this a safe community for you and your families because this is where they're choosing to live. We are dedicating many resources to increasing the hiring. We are at 13 vacancies right now, which says the total opposite, that we're down low in the morale because people are wanting to come work for the sheriff's department. We're the best agency in Washington State.
Morale is low in the Pierce County Sheriff's Department and crime is high. I speak with deputies there. They have no confidence in the leadership of the Pierce County Sheriff's Office. They even had a vote recently about that, a significant vote of no confidence in their leadership. As your sheriff, I'm going to look at who needs to be where they need to be. For example, Cindy Fajardo is going to be my undersheriff. She's been there for 35 plus years. She understands the agency. I'm going to be looking around and identify the leaders that are there. The people that are in leadership positions now have oftentimes been put there because they know somebody or they're friends of somebody. That will stop with me. We will put the right people in the right places, and that will improve morale immediately. That's what's going on in the agency, and as your sheriff, I pledge to you that we will put the right leaders in place and our morale will improve right away. Thank you.
Let's go to our state reps. There are many things coming down the pipeline and at the state level, a lot of discussions in there. So let's keep it simple. What will you do to help support people here on the Keep Peninsula, our nonprofits, the organizations here? Can we depend on you for helping us here? I'll start with you.
So I brought up, actually, in one of my earlier responses, one of the issues that they're having in Key Center. And, you know, I think certainly I can continue to support, for example, the Mustard Seed Project and all sorts of things. But I think that piece in Key Center is one of those things that, to me, really speaks about how important it is, because it has so many implications, from economic development to residential development in the area, that we have appropriate infrastructure that can support all of those things. We can't see the expansion of businesses. We can't see, you know, appropriate infrastructure to support businesses and homes if we don't work on that. And there are certainly agencies like the Department of Ecology and organizations like PAF3 that work with the legislature, that we can actually work together as a partnership to try to solve these problems. And I am definitely focused on trying to make that happen.
I've lived out here, and I've gone to school in our community. I've gone to our parks. I built food boxes out here with my Rotary Club. I've played in the Down Home Band and with Doc Rose, and they're volunteered at the Mustard Seed Project. I know the issues that the Key Peninsula is facing in and out. This is home, and I want to make sure that this community is fought for. And look, I'm not somebody who thinks that my role as a state representative, the state government is going to solve all the problems. It's going to take all of us. It takes our nonprofits. It takes our businesses. It takes public-private partnerships. And I want to do my role. I'm going to do the best that I can to make sure that resources are coming to this community, that our needs are being advocated for, and that you have a seat at the table where decisions are being made so that we are going to get the services and support we all need to have an amazing community out here. And again, protect the rural nature of this community. There's a lot of potential changes coming down the pipeline with development and everything, and I just want to make sure that we still have a nice, quiet, amazing community to live in. Thanks.
So when I first got elected, as though many of you guys know, the 26th district consists of Bremerton, Port Orchard, Gig Harbor, and Key Peninsula. So all of those cities, Bremerton, Port Orchard, and Gig Harbor, all have lobbyists. And every year they come together, the city council comes together, and they put forward all of these capital budget projects. I noticed Key Peninsula didn't have any projects. So I went back historically, and Key Peninsula had not had any projects. And one of the things that I decided to do was make sure that Key Peninsula got their fair share. So I reached out to a lot of the local nonprofits. I worked across the aisle with Emily to help get over $1 million for the Mustard Seed Project Senior Center. I've gotten funding for this building for the HVAC unit, and we're now going to be getting, we're fighting for funding for security system as well. Also Lake Bay Marina and Long Branch Marina and Pennant Parks.
I see you're sitting down at the end of the table all quiet down there, so you should throw something at me. So here's a grenade. What's your stance on gun control?
I'm sorry, I missed the.
Your stance on gun control.
Gotcha. I support the Second Amendment, but we also do not enforce the laws we have in the books, and we don't. And that is a big part of the problem. And we've also decriminalized behavior and wonder why criminal behavior happens then. That's a problem. We've created a society that's unaccountable to itself, and that invites bad behavior. That we have reasonable rules and regulations governing the firearms industry and how you can purchase and who can purchase. And we need to ensure that those resources are there to make sure that that's a robust system. And it goes back really to education as well. Making sure that people understand the implications of their actions. And that is a big part of the issue as well. There's no way we're going to solve this in 1 minute on this discussion, but again, I'll go back to let's enforce many of the laws we have in the books and stop decriminalizing criminal behavior.
I'll stand up too. So I grew up in a family of gun owners, a family of hunters. I was also in middle school when the Columbine school shooting happened. So I have grown up, in a family that really supports gun rights, but also as a student in a classroom, as we've seen the prevalence of gun violence really striking fear into the hearts of children and parents. But what I also know is that the majority of gun deaths are not these mass casualty incidents. They are unsafe storage. They are, suicidal attempts. They are accidents. And in Washington State, we have passed some of the safest laws in the country to prevent those kind of accidents, those kind of deaths. But if we don't have the federal protections to match Washington's protections, it's real easy to drive over the border into Idaho or Oregon, and even though you have a red flag law for domestic violence in Washington, buy a firearm somewhere else. So we need federal protections.
Let's go back to our state reps. So here on the Key Peninsula, we tried to put together a child care facility, and we're met with what burdensome regulations. And a lot of those were handed down by the many different agencies that pretty much stopped the Key Peninsula from being able to put in a child care facility. Because we don't have the infrastructure. And for rural communities, they don't have it. What can you do to address some of the burdensome regulations that are on the books that are from the different agencies that have hampered something like our child care facility?
I mean, look, I think it's the regulatory environment that's part of the problem with why we're seeing such a diminishing supply of childcare providers. Exactly what you're talking about here, and I don't think it should be as hard as we're making. We have too many well-meaning bureaucrats in so many different agencies. I work a lot with agencies in my legal work, and I mean, yeah, let me tell you, like we've got to make sure any child care facility is safe, but then also that they can operate and that they're going to be profitable, that people are going to make some money doing that. And I think we can do that. And I've got ideas I've taken to the Children Campaign Fund. I've got their endorsement. They're an organization that supports making child care accessible and affordable in the state. And I want to help set up micro businesses. I don't know why it's so hard for families to just set up a little child care facility even out of their home and have a licensing process and make it really accessible and straightforward for people to set those things up. And I think we've got to address the supply side. I'm completely with you on addressing the regulatory environment.
Again, with everything Addison said, we should be making it again, while making sure that we are focusing on the safety and quality of the childcare that's being provided, we need to streamline that process and make it easier for people who want to provide this kind of care possible and affordable. That's kind of the other side of this, is that for the childcare that does exist, the workers in that field tend to actually be making minimum wage. And it's not something that is affordable for a lot of folks to even stay in. And so we need to be working at this from multiple different angles to ensure that not only is it easier to create these facilities and to provide that care, but that the people who are providing that care can also sustain themselves. So we have high quality people providing that care for our kids. It was unfortunate what happened here on the Key Peninsula, and I'm committed to trying to make sure that we can actually make that a reality for folks, and we'll work towards that end.
So in 2015, when I first got elected, there was a bill that came through that required additional training for every childcare worker. That passed. I voted against it, and because I knew what would happen, and that was an immediate shutdown of numerous childcare facilities. I want to say it was about 25% across the state. Then during COVID, the governor put implementations on that reduced the number of children that we could have per facility, and most of those could not survive the pandemic. And here we are today. I had a bill this year that basically said, well, I think that we should have flexibility for people who are stay-at-home moms and allowing them to have 2 additional children in their home. That didn't even get a hearing. The chair of the committee and also DCYF said, oh no, we have to make sure that they have all this additional training, because I said we should at least have a carve out so that we can allow people to babysit other kids legally and not have issues with the state. And unfortunately, until we get new leadership in, we're going to have those issues.
So here's one that can go across the board. Society today is plagued with a homelessness population that we have never seen the likes of. The homeless population is made up of various different elements. Some people needing housing, some people are criminal elements, some people are just needing mental health and drug counseling. So at all levels, at the level that you're coming into, what can you do? And I'm going to go right down the line, and we're going to talk to every one of the people here, and I'll give Jesse a moment to catch his breath. And so we're going to start down at that end of the table.
Pretty tough to solve this in 1 minute when we haven't done it in decades. But I think we need to, first of all, separate the issue out a little bit, right? And I think everybody here agrees we have a moral responsibility to help people that cannot help themselves or have fallen on a tough time, and you give them a hand up to help them get back on their feet. And when you identify those issues earlier, it's a better outcome for all involved, right? But let's also be honest with ourselves that there's also another segment that's chosen a lifestyle, and they are overshadowing the people that legitimately need and want help. And we've got to stop pandering to that. Plain and simple. I am all for helping those that cannot help themselves or have fallen on a hard time. But those that have chosen a lifestyle and are overwhelming the system, that has to stop. And we've invited that behavior in this state, and we wonder why we have a problem. And there is a drug addiction problem that's a big component of this. And if we identify that earlier and we get those resources at the local level sooner, that goes a long way in solving that issue as well.
All right, I agree this is a big problem to solve in 1 minute, but you know, there are a lot of folks who are dealing with homelessness, substance use disorder, and mental health issues, and often folks have at least 2 of those at once. We've seen some real success from wraparound service programs that provide mental health and substance use support to folks who are facing chronic homelessness. The Department of Veterans Affairs at Retzel has a whole wing that is supporting veterans to have peer navigation support, to have job support, to have mental health support, and folks are getting out and getting on their feet and able to survive in a house once they get the voucher, to be able to live and afford on their own. These programs are successful, and we need more of them. We need more federal funding from HUD so that we don't have such a wait list for vouchers. We need first-time homebuyer programs, we need rental assistance, and we need to invest in mental health and substance use treatment and reimbursement rates so folks can thrive.
I guess we're doing this. We're all standing up. I don't want to be the lone person not doing it. So, again, with homelessness, what we have is when the police get involved, when the sheriff's department get involved, it needs to be when there are crimes that are taking place. Being homeless or houseless is not a crime. However, activities that people are engaging in, caused sometimes by the drug addiction and even sometimes by challenges that they're plagued by from the mental health arena, that they are engaged in criminal behavior. We need to first and foremost make sure that people are being held accountable to those crimes. We can bring them into the facilities and into the criminal justice system, but we do need the wraparound services for when they are being released back to our communities, so we have continuity of care so that we don't continue with that vicious cycle that we see it. It is deplorable to see the trash and the things that are along in our neighborhoods, homes that we have bought ourselves, and we are unable to keep people safe, so we need to be able to get together to work this out.
I was a police officer for 33 years in the largest city in the Pacific Northwest, and I worked the streets for many years as a patrol officer. My first 15 years, I have lots of experience with homelessness. We did surveys in Seattle, we found this out. Most people are drug addicts or they have mental health conditions brought on by either one, either mental health and then they drug themselves or whatever. And most people don't want help because with help comes rules and comes regulations. So here's the deal. When people are hooked on fentanyl and things like that, it is so overwhelming that you can't even compare it to nicotine. It's 10 times or 100 times worse than that. So we have to hold people accountable for the crimes they commit, such as theft, and we give them an option to go to jail or go to treatment. And we get them into treatment, and treatment can't be something that's just 2 weeks long or 30 days. It has to be a continuous process for a long time, and then we have to get them away from where they came from so they won't go back to drugs again. It's a hard process.
We have had a huge erosion of our civilization. For many of you guys who don't know, I believe it was last year or the year before, but we left session completely legalizing drugs. All drugs, heroin, everything. And the governor had to call us back into special session to make drugs illegal again. And we have passed legislation like not allowing police to pursue criminals and not allowing cities to clean up the streets after they've even offered people help and they have declined help. All of these policies I have voted against over the years, and they've failed, and we need to fix them with new leadership.
So in terms of what I think that I can do as a state representative, I'll go back to actually some of my work that I did in the state of Oregon. So in the state of Oregon, after my first session, in my second session, I actually became vice chair of a newly formed committee on substance use. And mental health. And that was because of this real recognition, and something that is definitely an issue here in Washington, that we need to really invest, as many people have said, in wraparound services, supportive housing, these sorts of things that we can actually use to help people get better. Because if we're not addressing the root cause of what brings people into that in the first place, then we're never going to see any changes. And so that will be a huge priority for me in trying to help people, is to compassionately hold those accountable who do engage in criminal behavior, but making sure that we are going back to fixing what is actually causing this issue to begin with.
I'll echo a lot of what was said in that it is unacceptable to be leaving people on the side of the road, lost in addiction and mental health crises, and then ultimately punting this to sheriffs and other first responders to be tackling without the support that they need. Right, and so we need both short-term and long-term solution to this problem. In the short term, it's making sure that we've got shelter and services to directly get people into, but we're also a nation of laws, and if you are committing illegal activity, then there's the criminal justice system, and that needs to be an avenue for getting folks the help that they need, or otherwise just being held accountable, and making sure we're getting folks back on the right track. And we need to be supporting other programs that are getting people, again, the shelter and services that they need. I've worked with vets that are becoming homeless, about to become homeless, and some of them would rather not stay in a shelter like Retzel. I've had clients successfully go there, but would rather not have that option if it means losing their pet. Too many places do not have that accessibility, and then in the long term, we need to solve our housing crisis and have our supply problem. I recognize I'm out of time. But again, huge discussion here, because I think solving our housing crisis helps solve the problem too.
Well, thank you. Let's see if I can get 3 answers to this in 1 minute. The first is we can do this bipartisanly. There's an interchange that we can do. I worked and partnered with Democrat County Council member Derek Young a number of years ago, and we used state and local policy in a combination to really gut the cartel trade out here that used to be predominant about 10 years ago. And as a result, we changed a lot of lives. And if you work together behind the scenes, and especially in the budget, you can find a lot of bipartisan solutions. One of the main things that we would want to do in the budget is we need to push back against the lobby in King and Snohomish County, where they budget, or where they put conditionals on the money that we budget in the state, so that all the money for helping folks that are needing homelessness support go to Seattle, because they put conditionals that say you can only provide solutions in one way. And of course, those ways only work in urban, dense Seattle, but not here. And the final thing I would say is there's a predominant notion that's being pushed by big pharma and massive corporations that say you can't be healed. I believe that people can be healed. And I think the legislature needs to adopt a paradigm that says we can try to restore people to health instead of medicating them indefinitely with some budgetary proviso. Those would be the 3 things I would do to address it.
What would you do to help those of us on the Key Peninsula, the nonprofits, the organizations here, Highway 302, the things that we need here? Can we garner your support?
Well, the first thing I would say is you got to listen to the folks. I remember many years ago when I first started knocking on doors out in this area, thinking that a certain solution would be wanted out here, only to find out that most of the people don't want a major push that would take away the rural lifestyle. So we got to listen to folks first and foremost, and engage ourselves with the community council, like I started doing when I came in, and that's when I first met you, Chuck. So we got to listen so that we don't try to enforce some type of solution that doesn't fit with what you want. Number one, you got to do a lot of roll up your sleeves and budgetary work. So for example, with Highway 302, one of the things we found to get a lot of maintenance done on Highway 302, especially when roads would flood out and stuff, was we changed in the transportation. I met with the regional leaders of WSDOT that managed out here and saw that all the budget money was getting taken and stored for Hood Canal Bridge stuff. And so we changed the budget so that they could actually spend their dollars back into your community. That's not something you see in a 30-second ad when people are running for office, but it's the type of work that you're really sending us back down to do, even though we don't get a lot of fanfare for doing it. That's what I'll continue to do for you.
This one I think is going to go, it's kind of federal and state, so I think I'll let both answer on this one here. The price of housing is skyrocketing. And let me preface for a moment though, I'm a builder, and the regulations that are put on me now to build a house, it's crazy what's required just to get started. What can you do at the federal level and the state level to really make housing affordable?
At the state level, the first thing I would say is we need to pull back some of the authority that we've given a lot of unelected agencies, because what you're getting is this bureaucratic mess where it's not just as a builder, you got to deal with the building industry, you got to deal with the Department of Ecology, you got to deal with A, B, and C, and then all of a sudden it just expands your timelines, raises costs, and then all of a sudden our kids can't afford to get the homes that we were once able to buy when we just got out of college and we're starting a family. So first and foremost, I would start to pull some of that back, not because I think that we are necessarily better at making those decisions, but because at least you can then hold us accountable for those decisions. We've got to put the decision makers back in a place of responsibility and accountability to you. If we do that, we're going to start to see the costs come down, because at the end of the day, every one of us up here is gonna say that we wanna fix this problem. We wanna make it easier for our kids to afford a home, for people to find a home. But the problem is that the people making the decisions aren't accountable to you with a vote. And I would seek to restore that first and foremost so that we can start to address it. The next thing I would do is go to regional empowered decision making instead of having everything be done out of Seattle through the GMA.
The first piece of this is that it's a basic supply-demand problem. We need something like 700,000 units in the next decade to keep up with how many people need housing. And we have such a problem here because King County's solution to housing for so long has been us. It's been Pierce County. People can't afford to live in Seattle. They aren't changing their housing policies and building the supply that they need there. And so people can't afford to live there. And they're moving on the highway. And now it's backing up the freeways and pushing people out here. And it's really impacting development in rural places that we really love out here and want to protect. And so the first thing is making sure that our policies, regulations are ensuring that we're building housing where it makes the most sense and being incredibly strategic about that, especially to protect places like the Key Peninsula. And then the second piece is on the regulatory side. I think there are states like Idaho, Montana that do permitting and other processes way simpler and more effective than we do. I know that cost overruns are huge when you're bouncing back and forth to agencies, and I'm all about trying to work with folks on that. Thanks.
Thank you. As a quick story, I remember canvassing a guy's house and he was replacing a window, big picture window, and a large part of our discussion was just how much permitting he had to go through to replace a window. I cannot imagine what it's like in terms of the cost that you have to build a house, and that adds into what people are ultimately paying for construction. I think while it is certainly important to make sure that we go back and look at all of those restrictions to see what can actually be loosened, because there are some environmental concerns that I'm sure that we want to make sure that we keep there. There have to be responsible ways that we can look at this and say, what is reasonable? And I'm committed to going back and looking at that, as well as looking into different kinds of incentives that we can do to create more housing. That is not only responsible, but also cheaper for our kids, including potentially even incentives to build starter homes, which I know we deeply lack. So those sorts of things. Thank you.
So prior to serving in the legislature, I was a dentist and I ran my own business. And I will tell you that there are very few legislators in Olympia who have ever ran a business. And I understand that when the costs go up, you have to pass that on to the consumer. So the estimates that they say just to break ground for the average home is around $56,000. And that is part of the rule, the regulations that our state has put on. In addition, there is no accountability when the people apply for builders apply for permits, and they take forever and a day. I mean, as a business owner, you're sitting there going, I've got workers ready to go. I need to break ground. We have, they're paying on their loans, and I believe that we need to have accountability for that. In addition, we need to stop adding more legislation that just increase the cost, like the natural gas ban. That is not what the people want. We need to increase the number of units that we have available, and that'll only happen when we stop adding more.
I think we made some strides at the state level. Yes, there are other regulations that I'm looking forward to our colleagues in Olympia continuing to solve, but our efforts to push for transit-oriented development, more density where there's already public transit, where we're already in urban centers, ensuring that we're building in a way that doesn't impact the rural character of communities like this has been so important. But I think at the federal level, as Drew said today, I don't want to steal your joke, but we don't want the federal government dealing with permitting issues. Our job will be to advocate for programs like Vice President Harris's recommendation for our first-time homebuyer program. There are recommendations for a tax credit for the rent that folks are paying, families who are struggling to afford to make ends meet. I think we've got the ability to invest more money in HUD, as I mentioned before, and housing vouchers. We need to be a good partner to our state colleagues here.
Well, I'll put my state senator hat on for the first 30 seconds and say this state has really screwed this up, and you're not going to be able to unwind this quickly. It's been a regulation here, a tax here, a fee here, a requirement there, and we wonder why housing's not affordable. The GMA was created in the early 1990s, and the state's population was 4 million. And today it's 8 million. And we've done nothing to go back and look at that. And is that working? I'd argue that it's not. And you look at the energy code, the building code council, it's one layer on top of another. And we make these arguments on the Senate floor and the House floor, and, oh, thank you, that's a good point, but we're gonna go ahead and do this anyway. And we wonder why housing's expensive. We gotta get out of the way, folks. And yes, at the federal level, you don't want the federal government involved in these state and local issues. One thing that I'd advocate for, that I have proposed at the federal level, is that we reform the GI Bill so that you can tap some of those benefits to utilize in a first-time home purchase, whether it's to cover closing costs, et cetera. And let's make that part of that. That will help your active duty members, those coming off of active duty, and retirees possibly to get a new start on life in their post-service career.
Jail staffing limits the number of criminals that you can keep in the jail. And we're told that many of our criminals are being released back on the street because there's not staffing in the jail. Can you tell us what you'll do to address?
First off, we do need to increase the staffing at the jail, and we need to make sure, and as your sheriff, I'm going to make sure that violent criminals are taken off the street and put in the jail where they belong. Some of the issues that we have there is prosecutors not filing charges and judges releasing people. When I became a police officer, there was a thing called no bail, and that meant that there was no amount of money, no bail you could pay to get out of jail. And now it's changed around to no bail means you don't have to pay anything and you're turned back out to society. We are releasing too many violent criminals there. We need to hold them in jail. We need to get our staffing up so that we can staff the jail so adequately. But at the same time, we need to make sure that our communities are safe. And we do that by holding people accountable. We put them in jail. We hold them there. We'll deal with the staffing issues to make sure that we have the violent people off the streets and in the jail where they belong.
We currently are very understaffed in the jail, and that is not the reason that individuals are not coming in and being held accountable. We are currently, as of yesterday, 42 positions short of the close to 300 people that are budgeted to work for the Pierce County Jail. Those are corrections deputies. Part of the problem is I can't think of one person that ever woke up thinking, for a living, I want to work in a jail. People don't understand what that job is, and it is actually a very viable, a great job. We are hiring right now. I did, under Sheriff Troyer's permission, I was allowed to start a new program. We hired 55 corrections deputies in about 6-month time. We were at 87 vacancies, and today we're at 42. The only individuals who are currently held in jail are the violent offenders, people that have committed crimes against people. And that is true that they do go through the system. There are some charges that aren't being filed. Sometimes it's because of the reports that are being written. They don't have enough information on them to hold somebody, and so they NCF or no charge file penned.
So, again, you guys gave me the microphone, so we're going to talk about schools. Okay. So, the state has accepted, especially during COVID, lower standards for our schools and have put on unfunded mandates on our schools. Not really paying attention to what they can do to help with the students' achievement. What can you do at the state level to help us in our local schools?
More than happy to keep talking about schools. It's our paramount duty under the state constitution. And what we need to do is make sure that that is the top priority, and creating pathways to graduation for kids that don't want to go to college, and investing in capital projects to improve buildings, facilities, investing in staff. We need more mental health professionals. We're coming out of the COVID pandemic, and there's so many kids that still need a lot of help with dealing with mental health issues, and so we have to be investing heavily in our public schools and making sure that it really is, in fact, our paramount duty. And look, I'm somebody who believes strongly in public schools and making sure that we have the best public schools in the country. That's my goal, and I think that we get We can measure that by graduation rates, we can measure that by reading and math scores. We've got to get back to the basics. We've got to make sure that kids are getting the information that they need. Am I out of time? Okay. Making sure that kids are getting the information that they need to help achieve what they want to be able to do in life and contribute to society. Thanks.
So as someone who, went through the public school system themselves, I think that it's incredibly important that we give all of our students every tool that they can to be able to succeed. And we also need to be making sure that our teachers and paraeducators and everybody who's a part of that system also have the tools that they need to succeed. And I feel like there is a disconnect, and part of that does come out of COVID, some of it does come out of funding, that is really, I think, leading to some of these accountability issues and trying to make sure that our standards are actually as high as they can be and that we're supporting students. But really, I think a big part of this is making sure that we support everybody in that chain, and that is something that I am committed to fight for. As I mentioned, I'd like to go back to the funding model to make sure that we are fully funding all of education, including special education. And that's something that I really want to focus on to make sure that all of our kids have that opportunity to succeed.
So when I first came in, as I said before, it was before McCleary, and I did just want to clarify that I believe it was around $7,600 per pupil per year that we were allocating, and now it is over $18,000 on average per pupil per year. So we have given a lot more funding to the schools, and one thing that we have all seen is that the test scores have lowered, the standards have dropped. We are not catering to the needs of our children. That needs to change. What I saw during the pandemic, and bless their hearts, I do believe that the teachers tried their hardest to teach students then. But I will tell you that I was a foster mother during that time, and I had high-risk students kids that would come through. Almost none of them were currently enrolled in school. And we are failing the kids that do not have the supports at home, and I believe that we need to get tutors for them.
I actually agree with teachers and the WEA that we need more local control and less top-down mandates on teachers. When I first came into the legislature and began serving, President Obama was in the White House, and one of the things I found that I didn't expect, where I had some continuity with the teachers and the teachers union, was on the top-down mandate coming from the federal level. And what you just saw Representative Caldeir denote was the fact that we've more than doubled over the last decade the amount of money that we put into education. Unfortunately, the state keeps putting mandates on the teachers so that they can't engage students the way that they know best, that fits their local school district, fits their local region, and fits the kids that they're teaching. These mandates are the height of hubris, to think that a part-time legislature knows how to better educate a kid than a teacher that's got the boots on the ground. If we start to pull back some of those mandates, they'll be able to better spend on behalf of our children, and we'll actually start to see test scores start to go back up, and we'll see our dollars stretching further. I think if we do that and we add choice that engages parents, we'll start to solve this problem.
So, down at the end again, I put you guys down there. So you're heading into the federal level, where we have a $35 trillion debt right now. That's growing $1 trillion about every 100 days. What the U.S. dollar is losing value on the international market. We say gold prices are going up, but actually the U.S. dollar is going down. What is your stance on debt spending?
Well, we need to get back to passing a budget. The last budget we passed was over 20 years ago under Speaker Newt Gingrich and President Bill Clinton. And it's been much longer than that we passed a balanced budget. We cannot begin to address deficit spending until you get into a budget framework. And you're not even going to get close to balancing a budget until you actually have a budget. So let's get away from the continuous resolutions. Let's get back to a framework and be serious about it. One of the things I appreciate at the state level is that we have a clock that we've got to get it done by, and we have to balance it. And that same model should apply at the federal level. I was there in, I believe it was 2014 or 15, and I was the number 2 Republican on the House Appropriations Committee. And we were up to June 30th, our fiscal year. And it took all of us pulling in the same direction to get that budget done, and the governor signed it at 11:30 on June 30th, 11:30 at night, and we averted a catastrophe for this state. You know what, we got close to that happening, but at the end of the day, we got it done by working together and solving the problems. And you can't fix that budget until you've passed the framework, and then you can dive deep into the spending issues.
You know, when I have these conversations about where we would make cuts and how we would be more fiscally responsible, I think a lot about the legislature in 2012, 2013. I wasn't a member then, but they were facing difficult economic times after the Great Recession and made some choices to severely cut safety net programs. And we are still digging ourselves out of some of the holes that those cuts to programs caused, particularly for people with disabilities, for our disability services. You know, there are thousands of folks who are on a no paid services wait list because there's no funding in the budget to cover those disability services. I say that because when we think about cutting federal programs, the federal government is only funding about 14 to 16%, maybe 18 tops, of IDEA, the authorizing legislation for special ed services. They promised to fund about 40%, and the state is picking up the tab. Before we think about massive cuts, I want us to think about how we're meeting the needs of our neighbors and our communities.
So every year we see initiatives come forward to address legislation that's been passed. A lot of those initiatives passed overwhelmingly people trying to rescind legislation. Those initiatives are usually ignored. Currently, there are 4 initiatives that are, and I'm sure you're all familiar with them. So where do you stand on those, and where would you vote?
And I hope that my answer may hopefully sway some of you to also join me in voting no on each and every single one of those issues. So all of these initiatives are first and foremost being funded by a hedge fund manager. And I don't know about all of you, but I think probably the last time that a millionaire hedge fund manager was bringing forth a ballot initiative, it was actually to help them, not regular people. And when we think about what these initiatives are actually attempting to do, they're trying to hold polluters accountable. They're trying to make sure that we have enough money to help fund school building. They're trying to make sure that, you know, we have resources to actually help the people here and to alleviate tax burdens for working people. That to me is really important, and that's why I'm voting no, and I hope I can encourage all of you to do the same.
I have to say that is a very interesting take on the initiatives. I voted no for the bills as they came through. For the Climate Commitment Act, like I said before, it increases the gas tax by about 50% or 50 cents, and then energy costs by 20%. And when I looked at what the projects were that it funded, a lot of them were pedestrian walkways and bike paths. And I said, well, why are we funding those? How is that going to help the climate? And they said, well, because if we have walkways and bike paths, then people will bike and walk to work instead of driving their car. And I don't know about you guys, but you can put all the walkways in, but the average person is not going to be able to get to work that way. And I do not think that that is what the people want. And the cool part is now you guys get to vote on it. So vote yes, pay less, and repeal those. And on top of that, I just want to mention that yes, there is a millionaire that did help fund that, but there are billionaires who are counteracting it, like Nick Hanauer and Bill Gates. So just saying, protect your pocket.
Well, thank you. I think the reason why you're seeing these initiatives is because you're seeing a lot of the middle class, working class families really struggle with being pinched. I don't think that any parent should ever have to choose between putting food on the table or gas in the car. And we shouldn't put our seniors in a position where they have to choose between buying their medical drugs and prescription drugs versus paying for their home, whether it be their rent or their mortgage. And that's what has happened over the last 10 years. Believe it or not, the taxes that these initiatives are going after were bipartisanly opposed all the way through and up to the point where they were passed, especially the income tax that was passed. I served on the state committee with a majority of Democrats, and Democrats joined us and voted against it before the Supreme Court put it on. I think it's right that you should have a say at the ballot box. Because these taxes, we need to understand, they're driving up inflation, they're hurting our poor and lower income and middle class, and we need to stand up for them, and you deserve a voice. And again, like Representative Calder, I voted against all these bills when they came through, and we did so bipartisanly with other Democrats. Thanks.
I would have voted yes on the initiatives that passed the legislature this past session. I'm going to vote yes on the initiative on the natural gas issue. I think we need to holistically change that whole approach. I've talked to the distillers in Gig Harbor Heritage, for example, that are even encouraging people to go to Idaho because they can't make their product if they don't have natural gas. And I know that there's a lot of families that depend on it for energy. We've got to be more practical with our regulations and making sure that we're thinking about people who are trying to pay the bills and actually trying to achieve the goals that we're setting. I'm going to vote no on the other initiatives. We have too many investments and jobs tied up in those bills, and I think that we can make changes through the legislative process to ease the burden on working families. There are other things I want to get to work on, like cutting taxes for small businesses, changing the way that we're doing property taxes, expanding the senior property tax exemption, for example, to help more seniors stay in their homes. And I just think that, yeah, with the other three initiatives, that we need to change things in the legislature. Thanks.
I don't want to fall asleep down there. And I want to figure out a way to preface this. We want this to be a terrible place for a criminal. And we know we've already heard some of the issues with the prosecutors and stuff, but what can you do to make this a terrible place for criminals and a safe place for families?
Well, we can start by holding people accountable to laws that are in place. We can start by trying to make sure that we're doing that versus trying to find a solution by helping people get out of what it is that they've done. And I can tell you right now that individuals that are coming into jails, oftentimes jails and prisons have more rights than individuals that are outside of the prison system itself. We need to make certain that when people are coming into the facilities that we do have programs that help develop them into viable citizens, and not times that we're just having a little bit of a timeout and a break to be able to just stay out of the community for some bit and then get right back into what it is that they've been doing. We need to make certain that if we're holding somebody accountable, it means that they're accountable from start to finish. Because they did something good, they don't get good time out for that, and we do that all too often. We have laws in place, we need to hold people accountable to those laws. When we're working with the prosecutors, we need to make certain that we are providing great reports so that they have the whole picture, so that when they are taking people to task, they're able to take people to task.
We need to hold everybody accountable, as Patty said, we need to enforce the law. But the job of the sheriff is to work with the prosecuting attorney's office and build that relationship that says, hey, we're going to arrest bad people, we're going to put them in jail, and we want you to file charges on them. We also need to meet with judges and talk with the judges about this no bail and releasing people back into the community. Start out with a conversation to persuade people that we need to put people in jail and keep them there. And then if the prosecutors and judges don't do that, then it's the job of the sheriff to hold them accountable and let the public know about it. So the public can know that prosecutors and the judges are releasing people back into society, specifically violent criminals, and they will hold them accountable the next time at the election. So they'll answer to the people like the sheriff answers to the people, and that's the best way to hold everybody and the justice system accountable. Thank you.
Kamala Harris proposes to give the first-time homebuyers $25,000 towards a down payment on a house. Well, we already talked about supply. We talked about building affordable housing. We talked about how that the houses just aren't there. And so I'm just going to leave this kind of open. What are your opinions and positions on this proposal?
problem with socialism, as Margaret Thatcher says, eventually you run out of other people's money. Where's it going to come from? We talked earlier about $30 trillion in debt. And we've seen what happened when the federal government got involved in the student loan business. Tuition rates went up because, oh my gosh, everybody can get money, and massive debt was accumulated. What happens when everyone gets $25,000 to purchase a home? I wonder what will happen to the price of the home. If we go back and just fix the budget, drive down interest rates, you'll pay less over the life of a mortgage with lower interest rates than you will with that kind of a scheme. That's not the answer to the solution, folks. Okay, and I'm getting a little tired at all levels of in this election cycle of people that have created the problem, running on an election theme that they're going to fix the problem that they're a part of. Let's just get back to this point. Let's just get a federal budget done, and let's get this economy on track for everybody. Thank you.
I imagine I inspired this question because I already said that I support this program. How many people know that Washington State has a first-time homebuyer program? It gives 0 interest down payment assistant loans for income-qualified Washingtonians. It's up to $10,000 down payment assistance, and it has opened doorways to homeownership for so many Washingtonians, including myself. I had given up on being able to afford a home. When I lived in Boston and San Francisco, I thought maybe someday I'll be able to afford a parking place. But in 2020, because of this program, I was able to buy my first home. I didn't have family to help me with the down payment, and this was a way that I could open that doorway and become a property taxpayer myself. I've been able to educate neighbors about this opportunity, and I know a constituent who bought a house here on the Key Peninsula because she was able to access this program. These kind of programs, this one is a revolving loan repayment program, so the seed money is there, and when you sell your house, it goes back into the program to help fund other people's opportunity. And we know it can work because it's worked here.
The issue that I have is that the true barrier to homeownership is the high cost of a home, and on top of that, the high cost of for the interest rate. So I'll just tell you, my fiance and I, we just bought a home, and we have over 800 credit score. It was we put a lot of money down, a whole heck of a lot more than $25,000, more than 10 times that. And we struggled to get a loan. And I will tell you that at the rate we're going, that $25,000 was nothing. The banks do not want to loan. They do not want risky loans. And the interest rate was as high as it is. If we take down the interest rate by 2%, I mean, that changes your mortgage payment for a $400,000 home by almost $1,000 a month. So even if you get somebody into a home with a $25,000 incentive, if they can't afford it, we're going to be back to 2008.
So I come at this question as someone who bought their first home in their mid-20s, working for a state agency from the state of Utah, so that's where I was living at the time, and was able to get into my own home through an FHA program. That was an amazing amount of help for me, and I cannot even tell you how useful it is for an individual to be able to get into a home, because that is how you start building wealth. And while it is, this idea that was proposed, who's going to pay for that? We may pay for it, but we get paid back in dividends by making our communities stronger through giving people that opportunity to build that generational wealth through their first home. Yes, there's a lot of other things we have to try to address on the supply side, income, economic development, all of that. But any help that we can give people, especially our young people who are otherwise out of that homeownership realm right now, we should absolutely be doing it.
Well, I don't know who kicked the game-tying field goal here and sent it to overtime, but I do appreciate you, and I'm more than happy to keep going. That's why we're out here. We love policy, we love talking about solutions, and like Derek Kimmer likes to say, I don't believe either party's got a monopoly on good ideas, and on something like this, I'm a bull fan kind of person. I think that we do need to be looking at why is the cost of housing so high in the first place, and it's because we don't have enough of it, and there are a lot of regulatory burdens that are also driving the cost. And I want to get at those root animal about trying to invest in working families and young families who are trying to buy their first home. I'm a lawyer, and it was really hard to get our first home. And I know that for so many people, they are wondering how they're going to do it. And I know parents, grandparents are wondering how their kids, their grandkids are going to buy a home. So let's address the root causes, and let's invest in working in young families too. We know that works. Thanks.
Well, I'm very cautious with the proposal, but I'm glad to see that there's a general bipartisan consensus here. The money could be well spent if it is spent and addressed the right way. The problem with the state program is that it only benefits people who are already established or are maybe a representative already. But the broader scope of people can't use the money that we've made available because, as Representative Caldeira pointed out, they might be able to get access to the money, but they can't get the loan to cover the rest of the gap. And the reason why is because we've made the money available, but we haven't addressed the supply issue. It's a basic matter of economics, that if you increase the money in there, but you don't increase the supply, the cost has gone up. And that cost going up is the very pinch that you're experiencing, that our kids are experiencing. And so I could be in favor of something like that, provided that we couple it with a policy that will rapidly start to increase our supply. So build a machine out there and start building homes that our kids could then use this money for because the cost has gone down. That's the way that you gotta solve this in a budget, which is what I want to go back and work on. Thanks.
So we're coming near the end of this. And I want to give each of our candidates a couple of minutes to wrap up and give some of their comments. So we will continue here for a little while so we can do one-on-one conversations with the candidates for a while after we're done here. But I am going to allow them to come on down the line, give a couple of minutes each, and I'm going to start down at that end down there.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, everybody, for coming out here tonight. It's a pleasure to be in front of folks and hear the questions and concerns. I'm asking for your vote. You're going to have your ballot in about 4 weeks. It's everybody says November, but you're going to have it real soon. And here's why. My background, I came out here in the early 90s via the U.S. Navy, served in the submarine force. That's given me a keen connection to our military and to what we need to do and what we need to listen to fulfill the mission there. We're lacking in our workforce development, in our shipyards, in our personnel, in our training, and our equipment. And we need to turn those things around if we want to remain a powerful nation. And that is critical for this state especially. We're the 5th most trade-dependent state in the nation. And in order to maintain that, you got to have freedom of the seas. We need to have a strong Navy. And that is right here in our backyard. Secondly, when I got out of the Navy, I went into the business world. I'm proud to have my company in business here, still 23 years later, going through some of the same crises that we've all been through. But doing that and signing the front of a paycheck gives you that perspective on what you're facing in taxes and regulations and what your employees are facing on a daily basis. And I think all too often that's lost at various levels of government. Finally, my last 12 years in the state legislature, I was elected in 2012 after folks in the community asked me to run. We didn't have a chance to do an opening statement. I represent the 35th, which is Mason County, the western third of Kitsap, and then a good chunk of Thurston County as well. But people in the community asked me to run. And again, as I mentioned earlier, having to have served in the minority for the past 12 years, while not desirable, it's been a heck of a journey and a lesson in how to work together. And we need more of that at the federal level. My commitment to you is I'll always listen to you. I'll be here, hear your concerns. Maybe we aren't going to agree on everything. Maybe we can't solve it all, but I'll be that open door for you. And my constituency will always, as I have for the last 12 years, will always come first above everything else. And so with that, thank you for having us here tonight, and I appreciate your support this coming fall. Thank you.
Well, it has been a pleasure to be with you here tonight and to represent you on the Key Peninsula for the last 6 years. A lot of you know this. I've been on this stage for a few elections before. I grew up the road in Sunny Slope. I came to the doctor at Key Center when I was a kid. I went to preschool in Belfair. I graduated from South Kitsap High School. This is my community. And the 6th District is also my community. My mom, also a South Kitsap High School graduate, spent summers after high school working in Nia Bay. My stepdad ran charter boats out of Grays Harbor. My grandpa owned a cabin on land he leased from the Quinault Nation. And getting to be on the road in all 6 counties, talking to neighbors, I realize that there is so much that unites us across county lines, across partisan lines. Our families want the opportunity to have access to the tools to build the lives that they dream of. I'm a first-generation college grad who had to travel to the East Coast in order to afford to go to school because we hadn't been investing in financial aid in Washington state institutions. Now we have some of the most generous financial aid in the country, but we need the feds to invest in our community and technical colleges too, in our research institutions, and in our trade programs like West Sound Skills Center and the Maritime Academy, so that students can have all sorts of pathways into the jobs of tomorrow. I was inspired to get involved in politics because of my time working at Planned Parenthood. We've made great strides to ensure that Washington State is a leader in not just abortion care, but healthcare more broadly. We've got more to do at the federal level to ensure that we are investing in affordability and accessibility and healthcare protections for all of our neighbors. We've got work to do around infrastructure. We all talked about it today, but our ferries and gorse projects and projects right here on the Key Peninsula won't happen without matching funds from the federal level, and I'm eager to go to DC and fight for you.
Thanks again for having us here. It is freezing in this building. I don't know what anybody else thinks. I'm Patty Jackson, and I'm running for Pierce County Sheriff. I've been a member of the Pierce County Sheriff's Department for the past 35 years. Throughout my career, I've seen some really great times in law enforcement, and I've seen some challenges like we're seeing today, where we have the staffing crisis, we have the rising lawlessness, and we have the loss of public confidence in police work. No matter what area of Pierce County we live in, we all have one common theme, and that is we are tired of the lawlessness that we're experiencing in our communities and across our nation. Public safety isn't just about reducing crime. It is about addressing the root causes. It is about ensuring that we have some systems that are in place, some strategies to fight mental health, to fight addiction, and to fight the homelessness that we're seeing. We cannot police our way out of this, but we can work together to create a safer, healthier community. We can do more, but again, it's together. My platform stands on 3 points: tough on crime, working in partnership with experts to provide services to those in need, and also to maintain an honest and trustworthy agency. Transparent. We will tell you what we're doing and why. We have an incredible law enforcement agency that I work for, the Pierce County Sheriff's Department. I ask that you trust the men and women who are selflessly dedicated to safeguarding Pierce County. I would be honored to earn your vote to oversee the Pierce County Sheriff's Department as the sheriff of the top agency in Washington State. I am proud to work for Pierce County. I ask for your vote on November 5th to be Patty Jackson, Pierce County Sheriff. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is Keith Swank, and I'm running for Pierce County Sheriff. I'm a United States Army Airborne Infantry veteran, and I'm a 33-year veteran police commander with Seattle Police Department. I worked for 33 years, my first 15 years as a patrol officer, handling 911 calls. I've been shot at, I've been stabbed, I've been punched, I've been kicked, I've been spit on, and I've had people try to run me over with their car, and I've done that to defend our communities, and that's what I'll do for you here as your sheriff. I'm the only one running for sheriff who's been a police officer, who's been out on the street, who's made an arrest, who's seen what it is to be a police officer. The current leadership at the Pierce County Sheriff's Office is failing the deputies in the corrections office and the deputies on the street. They have a no confidence vote in the leadership. There's no confidence there. It's nepotism and cronyism. We need a new leader there and new leadership in there. I'm going to be your sheriff. Cindy Fajardo is going to be the undersheriff. She has lots of time at the agency, but she has been stifled to be a leader there. I will bring out her leadership abilities there to help me bring the right leadership into the agency and change the culture there. I'm a de-escalation expert. during the Obama administration. I taught that throughout the country to various police agencies. I'm also a crisis intervention expert. We will have that training going on. There have been issues with constitutional policing. We will make sure that the Pierce County Sheriff's Office, which is a great agency, is made greater by the proper training they need to make sure when they're going out and doing their job, they're doing it to the expectation of the United States and the state constitution, and to the expectation of our communities and our community groups. I ask for your vote for sheriff, and I'll make sure that our agency is protecting you and will keep Pierce County safe. Thank you.
As your state representative, I have been honored to serve you for the last 10 years. I got involved in politics by going down to Olympia just as a citizen advocating over some bills, and found it was very challenging to get access to my legislators. And I realized that when I decided to run for office, that was a commitment that I would make to the public, would be to be as accessible as possible. Since I've been elected, I have had an open door policy, and I believe that it's my job, and I believe it's the job of the government, that we should listen to the people and the people as a whole. And that means that regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, you deserve an equal voice in my decision as I vote. Because of that, and because I don't cater to extremists, I have had a lot of backlash because of that. You know, it's very tough to make sure that you are giving the people, the grandma that's sitting at home, the same consideration as the person who's screaming at you in your office. That each person deserves an equal amount of weigh-in when it comes to taking that vote. And I've taken some tough votes. I've been every time that an initiative comes forward or a advisory vote comes forward, I always contact the Secretary of State's office to find out how the 26th district voted. Since I've been in office, I believe there's only been 3 votes that I've been off on for all 10 years. And that tells me that I am doing a good job listening to the public. I make sure that I answer my emails and I'm as accessible as possible, and I would be honored to continue to serve that, to continue to serve another 2 years and to be your legislator. Thank you.
Hi everyone, again, thank you so much for having me here. And again, my name is Tiffany Mitchell, and I'm running to be your next state representative in LD 26 in position 2. I am running to be a values-driven, hardworking, and compassionate legislator that will work to accomplish some things that we haven't talked about tonight, like preserving women's reproductive health care as a right, working to build safe, strong, and affordable communities, working to bring down the cost of health care and prescription drugs, and working to make sure that every kid in the state of Washington, regardless of where they live, has the opportunity to get the best possible education and the skills that they need to succeed in the future. Now, I personally think that it's important to bring up this evening that of everything you've heard, a lot of what has been focused on is the idea that something is bad and we should just get rid of it altogether. We're not focusing on what we're trying to actually fix and what should be fixed. And as someone who is solution-oriented, that will be a key focus of my tenure as a state legislator, is to actually work for you to find out what is it that we can do to help you. And I fully believe that even if something is hard, if we put in the commitment, and if I work with others, that is something that we can actually make happen. And that's a commitment that I have to you. Thank you.
Well, thanks again, everybody. Thank you to the Civic Center. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you to Key Peninsula News, everybody who made this event possible, all of you for bearing with us for over an hour here. You know, I'm Addison Richards, running to be your next state representative. And you know, people first ask me, why are you doing this in the first place? And then, why are you doing this again? Right? I apparently didn't learn my lesson the first time around. But you know, one thing people ask me is, you know, is there anything different this time? And I mean, one thing is that I shaved. And you know, the beard didn't work the first time, so we're trying a new approach this time around. But there are things that haven't changed. One is my commitment to this community, the fact that I deeply care about it. I've talked about that at length, and I have grown up and lived in every single part of this district. I understand the issues that we're facing backwards and forwards. We need new and effective leadership in Olympia to do the things that we've talked about tonight. And I'm still knocking on thousands of doors. I've met neighbors all across the peninsula and up in the Kitsap side, and what I hear time and again are concerns like cost of living, which we talked about at length, and there are concrete things that the state can do on housing, healthcare, childcare to help make things more affordable, taxes. We talked about that. We haven't talked a lot about public safety on the state legislative side, and look, my experience is representing victims of crime, people in human trafficking situations, sitting at council table fighting for protection orders for folks. And we have had 2 deputies that have been talked about for decades here, and nothing's been done about it. And that's one of the first things I'm going to be working on, to at least double that number going forward, so that we have the personnel that we need out here. We haven't talked a lot about, protecting reproductive health care. I'm the only candidate that is going to protect reproductive rights. I'm not going to spend legislative time trying to ban abortion in all cases with no exceptions. I believe politicians should be staying out of that issue. And look, my flyers are in the back. I recognize I'm out of time. I have my phone number on it. Give me a call. I'm happy to talk and be accessible to you. Thanks.
Well, thank you all for coming this evening. You know, the word bipartisanship is typically bantered around during campaign season. And if I can say anything tonight as I close, I hope that I can demonstrate for you that, for some of us, it's not just a word to be bantered around. For example, statistically, during the time that I've served you, I've compiled the most bipartisan voting record in the state history in Olympia. So much so that, in this last primary election that was just had, they had a significant sum of money spent in the primary challenge calling me too left. And it's not often that you get a chance to see those statistics because you're so bombarded during the campaign cycle with 30-second ads that come from out-of-state money that are trying to sway your vote one way or the other. But the truth is, there's a lot of bipartisanship opportunities in Olympia if you're willing to put in the work. And so tonight, for example, in a number of the questions that you saw, I don't think I heard a single issue where there wasn't an opportunity to be bipartisan on it. And so I gave you a couple of answers where I worked at the local level with local level officials like Derek Young on issues that dealt with drugs and crime. John Patrick Kelly, former chair of the Democrat Party, when we first came in, we weren't necessarily the best of friends, but then we worked together to fund parks out there. And I found a way to bridge that gap, and so did you, and that's the type of example that you're looking for. I did the same thing with a Democrat representative, the chair of the Transportation Committee, when we came together and found a way to fix the unsolvable budget on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge and stop your tolls from rising. I believe that if you work hard and you're willing to roll up your sleeves, you can achieve that. Another thing that you've seen in the time that both Representative Caldeira and I served you is because we're willing to be that tenacious person that rose up out of poverty and represented you, we rolled up our sleeves, we quintupled the amount of money that came to this district in terms of capital budget allocations because we were willing to humble ourselves, work bipartisanly with Democrat chairs of committees, and make the case for why we need that money out here. And that's what I'll continue to try to serve you as. And if you want those services, I humbly offer myself. Thank you very much.
Okay, and with that, I want to thank you all for coming here tonight.
Are you sure? Not another one?
Gave it a little one.
So, we're back to the